This is Eric Michael Loyd. I have a master's in psychology, neuropsychology concentration. I'm also a former RBT, getting back into it. Just need to take a competency assessment, which is just kind of like a CEU, rehearsing everything that you've already known, making sure you're fresh on that. This is from chapter 27 of, I don't know which book this is, but the topic area of the chapter, the section in the chapter that it's speaking on is Positive Affect and Decision Making by Alice M Isen. Starts on page 417. Of cognitive factors, chapter 27 of cognitive factors. Most people seem to have a sense that affect, feelings, emotion can influence their decisions and thought processes, at least under certain circumstances. However, it is usually assumed that such influence is something irregular or unusual, that only strong and infrequent feelings would have such effects, and that most often only negative feelings such as anger, sadness, or fear would have an impact on thinking processes. Turns out those aren't the only ones that do. Furthermore, most people assume that when affect plays a role in decision processes, such influences are destructive and tend to make their decisions irrational and less appropriate than otherwise. Interestingly, however, a growing body of research indicates that even mild and even positive affective states can markedly influence everyday thought processes, and do so regularly. For example, the presence of positive feelings has been found to cue positive material in memory, making access to such thoughts easier and thus making it more likely that positive material will come to mind. Isen, Chalker, Clark, and Karp, 1978, Nasby and Yondo, 1982, Tesdale and Fogarty, 1979. This reflects the fact that material in mind is organized and accessible in terms of its positive, affective tone, and that people spontaneously use positive affect as a way to organize their thoughts. Isen, 1987. Thus, evidence indicates that far from being an infrequent influence on thought processes, common positive feelings are fundamentally involved in cognitive organization and processing. Positive affect has also been found to promote creativity and flexibility in problem solving and negotiation, as well as both efficacy and thoroughness in decision making and other indicators of improved thinking. For example, Carnevale and Isen, as a reference, 1986, Estrada, Isen and Young, 1997, Estrada, Isen and Young, 1994, Green and Noyce, 1988, Hirt, Hirt, Milton, McDonald, and Heckeritz, 1996, Isen, Daubman, and Nowalki, 1987, Isen, Johnson, Mertz, and Robinson, 1985, Isen and Means, 1983, Isen, Rosenzweig, and Young, 1991, Lee and Sternthal, 1999. These effects have been found in a wide range of settings and populations, ranging from young adolescents, Green and Noyce, 1988, to practicing physicians engaging in diagnostic reasoning. Estrada et al., 1994, 1997, and in the literatures on consumer behavior, Lee and Sternthal, 1999, and on behavior in organizations, George and Brief, 1996, Stahl and Barsade, 1993, Stahl, Sutton, and Peled, 1994. Furthermore, recent studies in the coping literature are finding that even when people must cope with adverse events, positive affect is helpful, facilitating effective coping and reducing defensiveness. Aspinwall, 1998, Aspinwall and Taylor, 1999, Taylor and Aspinwall, 1996, Trope and Netter, 1994, Trope and Pomerantz, 1998. Therefore, under many circumstances, the influence of mild positive feelings on thinking and decision making has been found to not be only substantial but facilitative, leading to improved decision making and problem solving. How can these two views, people's intuitions, and the findings of such studies be reconciled? First, it is likely that typically when we think about feelings influencing thought, we tend not to pay a lot of attention to mild affect and therefore are less likely to attribute influence to it. So, mild affect. Second, we may be especially unlikely to pay attention to common, mild, positive feelings. Consequently, if people are asked to think about the possible impact of feeling or emotion on thought processes, they are most likely to answer at first in terms of strong affect and probably negative affect. People may not realize immediately that positive feelings, including those mild states that they experience frequently, do influence thought processes. Furthermore, the influence of positive affect is usually facilitative, but we often take positive outcomes of everyday processes more or less for granted, not searching for causes or connections unless things go wrong or performance is impaired. Weiner, 1985. Thus, we may not notice facilitative effects of positive feelings, but we may pay more attention when we have reason to think that happy feelings have impaired people's judgment or problem solving. All of these phenomena most likely contribute to people's underestimation of positive affect as a facilitating factor in decision making and problem solving. In addition, results of some studies have also indicated that there are times when positive affect actually does at least appear to impair or interfere with problem solving or thinking. Bless, Bonner, Schwartz, and Struck, 1990. Bodenhausen, Kramer, and Susser, 1994. McKee and Worth, 1989. Melton, 1995. However, most studies reporting such effects find specific conditions under which impairment is observed rather than general impairment. In addition, most of the studies addressing positive affect's influence on thinking do not find impaired performance, but rather report more flexibility and generally enhanced thinking and problem solving. Thus, one important task will be to try to understand what factors play a role in determining the influence of positive affect on performance. This chapter presents some of the findings regarding the impact of mild positive affect on thinking and decision making, and explores the processes underlying them and the circumstances under which they are likely to be observed. The focus is on decision making and problem solving, but in order to understand affect's influence on decisions, it will be helpful to consider its impact on cognitive organization, i.e., the way material is thought about and related to other material, and on motivation. This is because organization, or context and motivation, including the person's goals, play crucial roles in decision making. Bransford, 1979. Simonson, 1989, 1990, Tversky, and Kahneman, 1981. In fact, some of the reasons for discrepancy among the studies mentioned above may lie in that these other effects of positive feelings, including some that are now being discovered relating to expectancy motivation and intrinsic motivation. Finally, the chapter briefly mentions a recently proposed theoretical account at the neurological level that may help shed light on some of these phenomena. Ashby, Isen, and Turkin, 1999. To address all of these topics in this single chapter, consideration of each must be brief. I hope that the chapter will serve as a springboard for thought, even though it cannot be exhaustive or provide a detailed review of all of the literature in this rapidly growing field. I begin then by considering the influence of positive affect on cognitive organization. Positive affect, flexibility, and cognitive organization. A growing body of literature indicates that positive affect influences the way in which stimuli are thought about or related to other ideas in mind. For example, studies have shown that people in whom positive affect has been induced in any of a variety of simple ways, watching 5 minutes of comedy film, receiving a small bag of candy, or giving a word association to positive words, have a broader range of associates and more diverse associates to neural material. Isen et al., 1985. Similarly, people in such conditions are able to categorize material more flexibly, seeing ways in which non-typical members of categories can fit or be viewed as members of the category. Isen and Daubin, 1984. Kahn and Isen, 1993. Isen, Nidenthal, and Cantor, 1992. This has been found for items in natural categories, such as those used by Roche, 1975, Isen and Daubin, 1984, for products in the mildly pleasant class of snack foods, and for person types in positive but not in negative person categories. Both are Kahn and Isen, 1993 and 1992, respectively. Thus, positive affect enables people to see more similarities among items. It has also been found that if people are specifically asked to focus on differences and find ways in which items differ from one another, positive affect can result in more perceived difference as well. Isen, 1987, page 234, Murray, Sugden, Hirt, and Sugden, 1990. Together, these studies can be interpreted as indicating that positive affect promotes cognitive flexibility. People who are feeling happy become more able to make associations among ideas and to see more different multiple relations, similarities, or differences among stimuli than people in a neutral feeling state. It is important to note that the impact of positive feelings on thought processes, and especially on the results of assigned tasks, such as judgments, ratings, sortings, categorizations, etc., depends on particulars of the task and the situation. Nonetheless, the effect is regular, predictable, and understandable. If asked to judge similarity among items, people in positive affect conditions indicate greater similarity than do control subjects. If asked to find differences among the same items, they may indicate more difference. As will be explained next, this may not be as irrational as it sounds, nor is it the result of simple response bias. The process that underlies these effects, as suggested by the word association findings reported above, Isen et al., 1985, may be that people experiencing positive affect may engage in greater elaboration about the material. Thus, they see more aspects of the items and have more and more diverse associations to the items, as those studies reported. Then, as explained by Tversky and Gotti, 1978, for knowledge about material in general, not affective material or induced affect specifically, the context supplied by the task, searching for differences versus searching for similarities, will determine whether this greater elaboration, greater knowledge in the work by Tversky and Gotti results in judgment of greater similarity or of greater difference. Those authors found that people with rated pairs of items about which they knew more, example, United States and the Soviet Union, as more similar to each other than pairs about which they knew less, Bolivia and Ceylon, when the task required a similarity judgment. But the people also rated the pairs about which they knew more as more different from each other when the task focused attention on differences. Thus, to return to the affect situation, if people in positive affect conditions have more information, elaboration about material, or associations to it, then relative to controls, they would be expected to indicate more perceived similarity or difference among the items. They would be expected to indicate more perceived similarity or difference among the items, depending on the context created by the question posed. Nature of the materials. Another aspect of the context that is critically important in determining the impact that positive affect will have is the nature, including the valence, of the materials being considered. Thus, one cannot expect positive affect to influence the categorization of or increase the perceived similarity or difference of all stimuli automatically. To illustrate this point, let us examine the results of one study that extended the work on affect's impact on categorization to the area of person categorization, Isen et al., 1992. In that study, subjects were asked to rate the degree to which non-prototypic examples of positive or negative categories of people, bartender as a member of a category nurturant people, or genius as a member of the negative category of unstable people, fit as members of the category. Where do they fit those categories? Compared with control subjects, positive affect subjects rated the weakly related members of the positive categories as fitting better in the category, but this was not observed for the negative person categories. That is, people in the positive affect condition rated bartender as a better exemplar of the category nurturant people than did control subjects, but they did not rate as a better exemplar of the category unstable people. They did not rate genius as a better exemplar of the category unstable people. In accord with results of studies showing that positive affect cues positive material and memory and enables more ready access to such material and to a broader range of such associates, Isen et al., 1985, Isen et al., 1978, Tisdale and Fogarty, 1979, people in the positive affect condition could presumably see more positive aspects of the relatively neutral type bartender. However, nothing in their affective state would be expected to prompt their seeing the person type genius as better fitting a negative superordinate category in that situation. This interaction illustrates the importance of the type of material with which the subject is asked to work in determining the effects of feelings. The type of material. Okay? Although an underlying process, increased elaboration, is postulated to occur, this process is expected to be different for different kinds of material in the situation described, and also different for different situations. such as dangerous versus safe situations. Since positive affect cues positive material, the elaborative process would be expected to occur with positive material for all subjects, or for positive affect subjects working with neutral material. See Eisen et al. 1985. Additionally, presentation of negatively valent material, if negative enough, may also result in people's not dealing with the material, and this tendency may be more notable among people in whom positive affect has been induced, who may be seeking to maintain that positive state. Isen and Simmons, 1978. This will probably depend on the degree of negativity in the materials, the importance of the task, and so forth. It should also be pointed out that if the negative materials are bad enough, they may go so far as actually to overturn the affect induction itself. However, as will be discussed more fully later in the section on decision making, in a negative frame, where the task requires people to focus on possible meaningful loss or cope with difficult situations, there is evidence that people in a positive affect state face the situation directly and deal with it. For example, in a loss frame situation, those in a state of positive affect have been found to have more thoughts about losing than do controls. Eisen and Giva, 1987. And behave conservatively so as to protect themselves from the loss. Eisen and Giva, 1987. Eisen, Nigrin, and Ashby, 1988. Eisen and Simmons, 1978. Nigrin, Eisen, Taylor, and Dulin, 1996. This is also compatible with data showing that positive affect promotes effective coping in negative or stressful situations that have to deal with and reduces defensiveness. Those references are Aspinwall and Taylor, 1997, and the second one is Trope and Pomerantz, 1998. In the study under discussion here, Eisen et al. 1992, however, there was no negative frame, loss, or danger to the task. Therefore, such motivation and methodological additional complications were probably not in evidence, and the effect of positive affect simply did not extend to the negative material, as it often does not. The point illustrated is that the use of negative material in studies of the influence of positive affect can make for complexity in formulating predictions. A methodological point is worth noting here as well. The interaction observed in the person categorization study, Eisen et al. 1992, between induced affect and the valence of the materials also indicates that the impact of affect on categorization is not an artifact or indicator of processes such as response bias, non-systematic thinking, generally loosened associations, Swartz and Bless, 1991, or reduction in cognitive capacity. This is because the interaction between affect and category valence shows that positive affect, in comparison with the control group, influences the categorization of one type of material, positive, but does not change the way the other material, negative, is organized. By contrast, the alternative interpretation, global effects such as carelessness, non-systematic processing, loosened associations, or reduced cognitive capacity, should result in all categories or stimulus materials being affected equally. Similarly, a study of the impact of positive affect on job perceptions and satisfaction also found that people in whom positive affect had been induced perceived an interesting task that they had been assigned, but not a meaningless one, as richer and more satisfying. Krager, Billings, and Eisen, 1989. Again, This can be seen as reflecting an ability on the part of the positive affect subjects to see additional associations and aspects of interesting things. At the same time, the interaction with the type of task again indicates that a substantive process related to elaboration and thinking, rather than an artifact such as response bias, seeing things through rose-colored glasses, or non-systematic processing, is responsible for the observed effects. Next part is creative problem solving and positive affect and motivation. So I'll go ahead and read up until positive affect and motivation and then start the next video completing this reading. Creative problem solving. Another series of studies reflecting affect's influence on cognitive organization indicates, as would be expected from the kinds of findings described above, that positive affect promotes creative or innovative responding. Isen et al., 1987. See Isen, 1999, for a fuller review. Such responding can be seen as involving cognitive flexibility or the ability to put ideas together in new ways, and has been measured by tasks such as the candle problem, Dunker, 1945, and the remote associates test, Mednick, and Mednick, 1964, in addition to word associations and flexible classifications as described above. These studies also confirm that positive affect is distinct from negative affect and from affectless arousal in increasing cognitive flexibility and creativity. For example, in studies that examined the influence of negative affect, where the affect was induced by having subjects view a few minutes of the film Night and Fog, a French documentary of the World War II German death camps, people in this condition did not perform better than controls of the remote associates test items. Similarly, where affectless arousal was induced by having subjects step up and down on a cinder block for 2 minutes. Similarly, where affectless arousal was induced by having subjects step up and down on a cinder block for 2 minutes so that their heart rates were increased by 66%, participants did not perform better than controls on the remote associates test. Theoretically, arousal should not be expected to increase creativity, since it is thought to facilitate the dominant response in a person's response repertoire rather than an innovative one. Berlin, 1967, Easterbrook, 1959, Matlin and LeJonc, 1968. Nonetheless, its effect was investigated because people sometimes have the hunch that it is arousal rather than or as a component of positive affect that is responsible for the facilitative effect of positive feelings. However, the data from these studies do not support this hunch. See Isen et al., 1987, Isen, 1990, and Isen and Daubman, 1984, for discussion. Moreover, reconceptualizations of the arousal concept have suggested that it may not be a unitary construct and may need to be investigated differently from the way it has been addressed in the past. Lacey, 1967, 1975, Nyes, 1990, Venables, 1984. More recently, tests of these effects of positive feelings on creative problem solving have been extended to include investigation of performance on routine tasks, in order to examine whether there is evidence for an alternative interpretation having to do with effort, global motivation, or simple activation. In other words, whether positive affect participants are simply trying harder. In order to address this alternative interpretation, In some studies, we examined positive affect's influence on the performance of two types of routine tasks: circling the letter A every time it appeared in pages of randomly ordered letters, and long division, while also examining affect's influence on creative problem solving, represented by two tasks: the remote associates test and a logical problem solving task, meant to represent something like scientific creativity. These studies indicated a facilitative influence of positive affect on the remote associates test and the logical problem solving task, but not on either of the routine tasks on which performance of the positive affect and control subjects did not differ. Eisenberg and Chen, 1993. This suggests that it is not just an increase in overall motivation that is responsible for the positive affect subject's improved motivation on creative tasks. So once again, it says this suggests that it's not just an increase in overall motivation that's responsible for the positive affect subject's improved performance on creative tasks. Another study has reported that positive affect can facilitate the process of negotiation and result in improved outcomes in an integrative bargaining situation. Carnevale and Isen, 1987. An integrative bargaining task is one in which, in order to reach the optimal agreement, people must make trade-offs on different issues of differing value to them about which they are bargaining. Reaching agreement on such a task requires seeing possibilities, thinking innovatively, and reasoning flexibly on how trade-offs might be made. Obvious compromises or simple yielding will not result in satisfactory outcomes. For greater detail, see Pruitt, 1983. In this study, people in the positive affect condition who bargained face-to-face were significantly less likely to break off negotiation and more likely to reach agreement and to reach the optimal agreement possible in the situation than were face-to-face bargainers in the control condition. They were also less likely to engage in aggressive tactics during negotiation and reported more enjoyment of the session. Carnevale and Isen, 1986. And they were better able than controls to figure out the other person's payoff matrix, rate of profit for each component of the agreement, which differed for the two bargainers. These results support the suggestion that positive affect facilitates a problem-solving approach and improves people's ability to integrate ideas and see ways of relating aspects of situations to each other in order to come up with a good solution to a problem. It may also indicate a greater tendency or ability on the part of people in a state of positive affect to see things from another person's perspective, an ability that may relate to the dopamine hypothesis described later. Thus, in summary of this section, positive affect appears to influence the way in which cognitive material is organized, how ideas are related to one another in mind. In particular, it has been found in most situations to give rise to greater elaboration in response to neutral or positive stimulus material, but not negative material, and a richer context, which in turn promotes flexibility in thinking. It should be noted that depending on the task, with positive material, although the elaboration effect is occurring, the difference between positive affect and control subjects may not be apparent. The material itself induces positive affect, and this produces the effect of even in the control condition. And this produces the effect even in the control condition. See Isen et al. 1985. This means that in a task that deals with material of neutral to positive valence, undertaken while a person is feeling happy, one should expect unusual and innovative, though reasonable and logical, thoughts and responses. It is a mistake to assume that people in whom positive affect has been induced will think only those arguments and thoughts about the experimental materials that are provided by the experimenters. From the research reviewed here, we should expect people in the positive affect condition to think about the materials in a more elaborated, extensive, flexible, responsible, and positive way, provided the materials are not negative or boring. Last paragraph here before I leave off and start the next video. In the case of negative material, it is more difficult to predict the behavior of people in a state of positive affect. If there is not a clear reason to focus on the negative material, we would expect people in a positive affect condition not to elaborate the negative material more than controls. In some tasks, for example, categorization, word association, this will result in their responses not differing from those of control subjects. Isen et al., 1985-1992. On other tasks, we would expect positive affect participants actively to avoid or show caution with the materials, if possible, in the situation. This might mean they would appear to be impaired in their ability to perform the task or slower on the task compared with controls. However, in situations where the person needed to deal with the negative material or where it would be the person's longer-term benefit to do so, the research indicates that people in positive affect will show greater elaboration and enhanced coping even with negative materials or problematic situations. Aspinwall and Taylor, 1997. Isen and Giva, 1987. Trope and Pomerantz, 1998. Issues related to those distinctions are discussed in the next two sections. So in the next video, I'll read positive affect and motivation. Thank you for your time. I don't want to make the videos too long and lengthy.